Hey everyone, Cody Menz here, and in this video I have a bit of a preview and overview of the CS-52C, which is a upcoming Polish premium medium tank. This is one of the tanks that is pretty likely to come out for holiday ops at the end of 2022 here, or we will see it pretty close, in the near future. This tank, essentially the main selling point of it is having the turbo mode that you find on the tier 10 CS-63, but at tier 8. It's kind of different, but is that going to make up for everything else about the tank? We'll see. This tank, so it has a 100mm gun, and armor is not too great. It is pretty fast though, in and out of the turbo mode. Just getting the mobility here. We're going to do a little bit of a breakdown and a comparison and a quick look at the armor for this tank. Your base mode though, you go 50 kilometers an hour, 17 reverse, and then 70 kilometers an hour, 25 reverse in the turbo mode. Now you do lose some camo, and obviously your accuracy is going to go to crap when you're in turbo mode, but it makes you one of the faster tanks, at tier 8, especially for mediums, where much like the tier 10 CS that has this turbo mode, you go from a pretty quick medium to a pretty quick light tank. So it's going to be pretty unique at tier 8 and kind of shake things up. Now, getting into the tank, so like the little blurb that they have here, this is essentially a 100mm variant of the CS-52 tank. Like we do have the CS-52 LIS, which is already a premium tank. This is a pretty different tank to that. Now, in the comparison here, I've got the CS-52C, which is the tank we're focusing on here, the Tech Tree CS-53, the premium CS-52 LIS, which has a 105mm gun, and then I threw in the T-44-100 because that's a pretty quick single shot tier 8 medium tank, and I feel like this compares to that with its mobility and also the lower alpha gun. Your gun only does 250 damage, and your penetration isn't crazy great, but it's not awful. It's compared, it's comparable with the CS-52 LIS here, less than the Tech Tree, more than a T-44. You do have a premium heat round here that's 270mm with the pen, so not super high, but it gets the job done for a fast tank, but you're not gonna, be winning any awards basically for your penetration and also your damage per shot, much like T-44-100. This is kind of, I guess, 2022's version of that tank, which used to be very popular, but it's kind of fallen a little bit behind as the game, basically progresses a bit, especially with the gun and penetration department. So getting down here, gun traverse, pretty good because this is a fast tank. And gun depression, just okay at 7 degrees. It's not as good as the Tech Tree. Same as the CS-52 LIS though. Your accuracy, the overall accuracy isn't great. It's the worst out of these tanks here, and much worse than the, comparable in the mobility department, the T-44-100 at 0.34. So that's something to keep an eye on. This thing's not like a sniping tank. Your aiming time as well is a little long, especially when you get into the turbo mode. Your accuracy is not going to be very good, just like the tier 10, and your DPM is a little low too. Basically a low over 1900 compared to these tanks that are over 2000 and closer to 2100, 2200 here. So the gun is definitely lackluster on this thing. When you're comparing it against medium tanks, comparing it against light tanks, it's still medium, so the gun's not too shabby. But basically, the gun is a little bit of a letdown, to be completely honest. Turret armor, it says 260. We'll get into the armor here. This thing doesn't have any armor, so just completely forget that there's any values here whatsoever. It doesn't have anything. Mobility, that's the main, kind of selling point of this tank. Now, outside of turbo, your speed, it's not too bad. 50 kilometers an hour, so it's a little bit slower than the T-44. Same as these, for the top speed. However, it's pretty quick. But once you swap over to the turbo mode, you go up to 70 kilometers an hour and 25 reverse. So basically goes to one of the fastest, tier 8 medium tanks, if not the fastest. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but you're essentially switching from a medium to a light tank, but you do sacrifice a bit with the accuracy in the gun department, so you're gonna have to swap in and out, but it does allow you to get to those light tank locations early on where other medium tanks can't get to, and then kind of transition and duke it out with a light tank. CS, and also repositioning. The CS-63 tier 10 does a pretty good job at that. Traverse speed, a little bit low compared to the T-44-100. A little surprised it's not higher. It's not a bad value, but it might hurt you a little bit when you're in the turbo mode, not being able to traverse as fast as, say, a T-44. Camouflage, not too bad. This tank is very low to the ground. You do lose a little bit of camouflage when you're in the turbo mode compared to outside of it, so keep that in mind, because it goes from having slightly better camo than these tanks to slightly worse camo when you're in a turbo mode, and your V range is just basically standard at 380. Now getting into the tank itself, your crew, your basic crew, commander, gunner, driver, loader, nothing too shocking there. And the armor, and that's where I'm talking about it has none. So this is just a 120 millimeter gun, 200 millimeters a pen, nothing crazy. Tier 8, you're gonna get penetrated pretty much every time in this tank. Just going up here, turret's got nothing. You're gonna get penned pretty much everything. It's gonna ricochet above the gun, unless somebody shoots heat at you. But this thing, is very lightly armored except for the mantlet area, and even that, isn't, if you're getting shot by tier 9s and 10s and TDs, it's still gonna pen it. See, very light medium tank is essentially, if you haven't picked up on that yet, with the turbo mode. So pretty exciting. It's gonna be very difficult to play, so that's not gonna be a tank that is for everybody. But I think the best, kind of, tagline is, it's kind of like a 2022 version of the T-44-100, where gun's a bit better, albeit lower DPM, and ultimately, like, the turbo mode makes it more interesting and flexible than the T-44-100, and it's not going to be the best tank, if just going off the stats here. However, statistically, it should be pretty dynamic in the battlefield. Just like the tier 10 CS-63 doesn't always look that great if you look at the stats. This will be able to kind of reposition, zip around the battlefield pretty quickly and get to where it needs to be. However, it's going to be tough, I feel like, when it comes down to actually fighting toe-to-toe with tanks because of your low alpha, slightly poor penetration, slightly poor accuracy, and low DPM. Where it kind of seems like, you're going to have to lean a little bit on other tanks around you. But in any event, it should be pretty interesting having a turbo tank at tier 8. And, it seems like the CS-63, people like playing that, where it's a little different. And this tank, will be a little bit different at tier 8. I don't think it's crazy good by any means. It's not awful, but is definitely going to be one of those tanks where you're either going to love it or hate it, because it's not very easy to play this thing to make the most out of it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video, and hope to see you in another video sometime soon, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.